Hello everyone, and welcome to Zareth Prevails. This is my first Grand Arena Counters episode, and I want to discuss the viability, or lack thereof, of Jedi Training Rey versus the new awesome Geonosian squad. Currently, my biggest issue in Grand Arena is not necessarily having to defeat Geonosians. I've never really had a problem with that, but I've struggled with the fact that basically Traya has been just tied to the Geo squad, and that really doesn't give me much flexibility if I need to use Traya against something else like Night Sisters or taking out a piece of General Grievous's squad. Traya, at least at Gear 12, can't really take on Gear 13 Grievous, but she sure can take out at least one, maybe two characters with him. Anyways, this really isn't about General Grievous and countering him. It's about trying to find a viable alternative to beating the Geonosian squad with a team that isn't Traya. There are a lot of squads out there that people have been theory crafting. If you go take a look at, for instance, Clash, the guy from the Scoundrel server, he's got a lot of really crazy and awesome ideas. I didn't really necessarily have any of those characters available at the levels that they need to be at, and so what I turned to was a relatively common one, and I saw a bunch of just random videos. I wasn't really sure what to make of them. I didn't really see any with the composition that I'm going to show you, but I'm sure they're out there and are successful, and I'm sure that the videos are so wonderful, but I didn't see them. So the other purpose for this video is really just to make sure that people who don't have access to Traya can still beat Geonosians without having to use one of their top tier meta teams. Now you can see at the top of the screen all the different characters that were used and the different stats involved. I realized that it doesn't show everything, can't really show offense and speed, and I decided that speed was probably a little more relevant in this matchup, so I showed speed and all the other stats associated with it, or rather just kind of placed there with it. My opponent's Geonosian squad, just so that we're a real clear up front, my opponent has openly admitted that his Geos aren't the absolute best, but they are Gear 12 and they're modded relatively quickly, and I thought that that was probably a really good start to trying this. The things that I found in my playtesting were really promising, and whereas I don't think that this is going to be a definitive counter in terms of I don't have the most amazing gear and mods, my opponent doesn't have the most amazing gear and mods, but it's a really good starting point, and so you'll definitely see more of me using this team in the future, and I'm actually pretty excited about it. I really wanted to try the Resistance Trooper in the 5th slot instead of Holdo. A lot of people using Holdo to put days on all the Geonosians, and I a little bit think that's unnecessary, at least in my initial findings. So let's just kind of take a look here at my first few attempts. So really, there are just a couple threats in the Geonosian squad, and there's a lot of difficult things to deal with. Number one, you're trying to deal with all of their combined health, and so if they've really stacked their different gear, it can be really tough to remove the squad just because they have an effective hit point range that is just sky high. It's really difficult to shift that kind of hit points in squad, and as you have probably been the victim of, Geonosians can just really destroy your team in like 1 or 2 hits. If you let them go at all, they can really mess with you. They'll just, if they can kill one character, if they get their momentum going, they're starting to heal, and they just really kind of take you out. And you can see my first attempt failed, and I didn't have time to keep playing it out. My friend had put his Geonosian squads there. I had like a 1 hour window, and my kids were screaming. It was Friday night. I needed to get in and destroy some Geonosians if possible and get out. So let me kind of just walk you through this fight here. The first thing you really want to focus on is getting the Geo Alpha and Poggle both kind of incapacitated in some way. Either you want like ability block on them, or you want them to be stunned, because they're the ones who can cleanse the rest of the team. They're the ones who kind of just hold the entire squad together. And if, at least against Jedi Training Rey, they're able to get a turn and cleanse the entire team, then you are kind of just in trouble. You're not going to have a good day. So the goal at the very start is just to try to stun both of them if you can. I know that a lot of people really like to take Admiral Holdo instead of Resistance Trooper, and I do get that. That's kind of appealing in a lot of ways, but I think that the fact that she can only daze realistically one time in the entire fight, and then she's kind of worthless the rest of the time, it kind of doesn't make sense to me, especially because Poggle and the Brood Alpha can both just like cleanse it anyways, as long as they don't have ability block on them. And so I opted for more DPS, which maybe against a fully loaded Geonosian squad that really makes a big difference. Maybe you need more control pieces as opposed to more damage, but I decided to try Resistance Trooper for whatever reason. So this is my third attempt. My first attempt failed, second attempt was better, and I feel like I have gotten better each successive attempt. And you can see that my opponent, I was able to get Alpha stunned, but Poggle was still being resistive here, and that was really going to make me a little bit sad if I couldn't get him stunned. And so a second attempt with R2, I didn't get him stunned, and the hope would be that Jedi Training Rey would be able to eventually use her mind trick, or R2 would get another turn like just happened, and I could stun him. And then really after that, you have to keep an eye out for your opposing Geonosian team's turn meter, because you don't want them to get a ton of turns. But if you've already dazed the Brute, you've stunned the Brood Alpha and Poggle, there are only a couple Geonosians left to hit, and you can see that Spy got loose. He hit Resistance Trooper for a huge amount of damage and just destroyed him. But I decided that this had started promisingly enough that this was actually a good test to see if you could face a little bit of adversity at least with this squad. And the answer is yes, you can face at least a small amount of adversity. And really, I mean, once you can take out the Alpha, the rest of the squad is just, they're gone. They're no longer relevant. You can just destroy them at will. I know that the Spy still kind of generates a little bit of threat, but unless you're down to just one character, he can one-shot one character and then he'll eventually fall. So that one I was able to face a little adversity and win. And then in my final match, I was able to, I think this is probably my best run. I mean, you would hope that it would be my best run, considering I've practiced, the 3 times prior. But let's see how I was able to do. So, as always, just try to do the mind trick on the Brute. Try to get the stun on the Brood Alpha if possible. And then I used, instead of using BB-8 to do extra damage with Rey, I used the assist on R2-D2 against Poggle to try to get an early stun. So those two are out of commission. The Brute is out, and then I was able to use R2 to also, I used his AoE to be able to get expose on all of the other Geonosians, and I actually really like that move because that means that you can control their turn meter a little bit, as long as you're using a lot of specials, which Jedi Training Rey is almost like the ideal character for that, just because her lead reduces turn meter every time you use a special. It reduces turn meter on everyone who has expose. And so, really, I mean, once I was able to get expose on everyone, none of the Geonosians were even close to being able to go. And this Geonosian squad isn't necessarily like lightning quick, but they're all in the, 70s to 90s range, which is kind of an average squad that you're going to face. Maybe you'll face something way faster. I realize that some people are modding their Geonosians to be completely insane, but the final match was actually really easy, and maybe there was some RNG there. I got exposed on all of the Geonosians, and maybe that's not necessarily that realistic, but so I was relatively pleased with how the Geonosians were able to be manhandled by Ray, and I didn't have to gear Holdo. However, the fact that I'm using C3PO in that squad means that I will need to end up gearing and putting a Zeta on Barris, which I have resisted for years, literally. It's really kind of unfortunate, but really, Barris keeps being a really solid counter to a lot of different teams anyways, so I've just been stubborn. There's not really a good reason not to have Zeta'd Barris at this point for me. So anyways, guys, that was my playtesting. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember that in all things, Xaereth prevails.